Mary ran out of her small house in Riverside Estate, her heart beating fast like a drum. The whole neighborhood was awake now. People were running, shouting, crying. She had never seen anything like this before. The river was gone. Where the beautiful blue river used to flow just yesterday, there was nothing but dry, cracked mud. The same river that had given life to their community for over 50 years. The same river where children played, where mothers washed clothes, where farmers got water for their crops. All gone. But wait, let me tell you how this all started. Because what happened that morning was not normal. And the reason why will shock you. 3 days earlier, the sun was setting over Riverside Estate, painting the sky orange and pink. It was a peaceful evening in the busy urban community. Cars moved slowly on the main road. Street vendors called out their goods, and the sweet smell of fried plantain filled the air. David sat by the riverbank, watching the water flow. He was a simple man who worked as a security guard at the local bank. Every evening, he came here to think and relax after his long day. The water looks so clear today, he said to himself, dipping his fingers into the cool river. That's when he saw her. At first, David thought his eyes were playing tricks on him. The water seemed to shimmer and glow. Then, for just a moment, he saw something that made his breath stop. A beautiful woman with long flowing hair was sitting on a rock in the middle of the river. But this was no ordinary woman. Her skin glowed like moonlight, and her hair moved like water even though there was no wind. David blinked hard. When he looked again, she was gone. Am I going crazy? He whispered to himself. Unknown to David, he had just seen the guardian of the river, a kind spirit that had protected their water for many, many years. The people called her a mermaid, but she was much more than that. She was the life force of their river, the reason why their water was always clean and fresh. But David was not the only one who had seen her that evening. The hunters planned 3 streets away from the river. In a small, dark room, a man named Jake was planning something terrible. Jake was not like the other people in Riverside Estate. While others worked honest jobs, some as teachers, some as shop owners, some as drivers, Jake made his money in bad ways. He stole things, he cheated people, and he was always looking for ways to get rich quick. That evening, Jake had been walking by the river when he saw the same beautiful woman that David had seen. But unlike David, Jake did not think she was a spirit to respect. Instead, his greedy mind saw only one thing: money. If I can catch that mermaid, Jake said to himself, his eyes shining with greed, I will be the richest man in this whole city. Jake had heard stories from his grandmother about mermaids. She used to tell him that mermaid scales could cure any sickness and mermaid tears could turn into diamonds. He had always thought these were just stories. But now that he had seen one with his own eyes, Jake believed every word. I will catch her tomorrow night, he decided. Then I will sell her parts to rich people who believe in such things. I will make millions. Jake spent the whole night making his plan. He bought a strong fishing net from the market. He got a sharp knife from his kitchen. He even bought a big bucket to carry the mermaid in. But Jake did not know the truth. The beautiful woman he had seen was not just any mermaid. She was the guardian, the protector of their river. Without her, the river would die. And when the river died, everything in their community would die too. The next day passed normally in Riverside Estate. Children went to school, adults went to work, and life continued as usual. Nobody knew about Jake's evil plan. As the sun began to set, people started coming to the river as they did every evening. Some came to fetch water, others came to wash clothes, and some just came to enjoy the cool breeze. David was there again, sitting in his usual spot. He kept looking at the water, hoping to see the beautiful woman again. "David, what are you looking for?" asked his friend Peter, who had come to wash his car by the river. "Nothing special," David replied, not wanting to sound crazy, just enjoying the evening. But David's heart was beating fast. Something felt different today. The water seemed restless, moving faster than usual. The birds that normally sang by the river were quiet. Even the fish that usually swam near the surface were nowhere to be seen. As darkness began to fall, most people went home. Soon, only a few people remained by the river. David was getting ready to leave when he heard a splash in the water. There she was again. The guardian sat on the same rock as before, combing her long, beautiful hair with her fingers. Her skin glowed softly in the moonlight, and when she moved, the water around her sparkled like stars. David felt peace wash over him. There was something so calm and good about her presence. He wanted to call out to her, to thank her for making their river so beautiful and clean. But before he could say a word, something terrible happened. Splash! A large fishing net flew through the air and landed right on top of the guardian. "Got you!" shouted Jake, jumping out from behind the trees where he had been hiding. The guardian cried out in shock and fear. Her voice was like the sound of gentle rain, but now it was filled with pain. She struggled against the net, but Jake had chosen his trap well. The more she moved, the more tangled she became. "No!" David shouted, jumping to his feet. "Let her go!" But Jake was not listening. His eyes were wild with greed as he pulled the net toward the shore. "She's mine now," Jake laughed. "I'm going to be rich, 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 rich." The guardian looked at David with eyes full of sadness. In that moment, David understood that she was not just a beautiful creature. She was something much more important. She was asking for his help. David ran toward Jake, but he was too late. With one swift movement of his knife, Jake did something so terrible that the very air seemed to scream. The guardian's light began to fade. Her beautiful glow grew dimmer and dimmer until it was gone completely. The water around her turned from clear blue to dark red. "What have you done?" David cried out, tears flowing down his face. Jake just laughed. "I've made myself rich. That's what I've done." He pulled something shiny from the water, a scale from the guardian's tail. "Look, just one of these will buy me a car." But as Jake held up the scale, something strange happened. Instead of shining like a jewel, it turned black and crumbled into dust in his hand. What's happening? Jake stammered. That's when they both noticed it. The river was changing. The water level was dropping fast, very fast. The water, David whispered in horror. It's going away. Within minutes, the river that had been flowing strong just moments before was now just a shallow stream, and it was still getting smaller. Jake's face turned pale. This can't be happening because of what I did. It's just a coincidence. But David knew better. The guardian had not been just any creature. She had been the life of their river. And now she was gone forever. By midnight, what had once been the beautiful blue river was nothing but wet mud. By dawn, even the mud had dried up completely. And that's when the screaming started. Mary was not the only one running that morning. The entire riverside estate was in chaos. Mrs. Grace, who ran the local restaurant, stood staring at her empty water tank. "How will I cook food for my customers?" she cried. Mr. John, the farmer who grew vegetables to sell at the market, looked at his dying plants with tears in his eyes. "My crops, they're all going to die." Children who used to play by the river stood confused, looking at the empty space where their playground used to be. "Where did the water go, Mama?" Little Sarah asked her mother, but nobody had an answer. The community leaders called an emergency meeting at the town hall. Everyone came, young and old, rich and poor. They were all scared and confused. "This has never happened before," said Chief Mike, the head of their community. "Our river has been here for over 50 years. Rivers don't just disappear overnight." "Maybe it's the dry season," suggested someone. "The dry season is not supposed to start for 3 more months," replied Teacher Kate, who taught at the local primary school. "Then what could have caused this?" asked Dr. Paul, who ran the community clinic. Nobody had an answer, but David knew, and the guilt was eating him alive. He had seen everything happen. He had watched Jake kill the guardian, but he was too ashamed to speak up. Who would believe such a crazy story? Maybe if I just keep quiet, everything will go back to normal, David thought to himself. But things were getting worse, not better. By noon, the real problems began. The water taps in every house ran dry. The community well, which had always been full of clean water, was now empty. Even the small streams that fed into the main river had stopped flowing. Mrs. Rose, who was pregnant with her 3rd child, fainted from thirst. Dr. Paul had to give her water from his small emergency supply. "We need to do something fast, Doctor," Paul announced. "People are starting to get sick from not having enough water." Chief Mike organized the men to drive to the nearest city to buy water. But the nearest city was 3 hours away, and they could only buy small amounts. "This is not enough," Chief Mike said, looking at the few bottles they had managed to buy. "We have over 2,000 people in this community. These bottles will last maybe 1 day." Meanwhile, the children were suffering the most. Little babies cried because their mothers had no water to mix their formula. School had to be closed because there was no water for the children to drink. What kind of curse has fallen on our community? Asked Mama Ada, the oldest woman in Riverside Estate. Her words sent chills down everyone's spine. A curse? Was that possible? As the day went on, more strange things began to happen. The plants in people's gardens started dying, even though they had been watered just the day before. The air became dry and dusty. Even the usually busy birds stopped coming to the area. It was as if life itself was leaving Riverside Estate. That evening, as people gathered again to discuss what to do next, Jake stood among them, trying to look as confused and worried as everyone else. "This is terrible," Jake said, shaking his head sadly. "I hope we find a solution soon." But inside, Jake was panicking. He knew this was his fault. The mermaid scale that had turned to dust in his hand was proof that what he had done was connected to the river drying up. But it was just a fish, Jake kept telling himself. A strange fish, but still just a fish. This can't be because of what I did. However, deep in his heart, Jake knew he was lying to himself. David, standing nearby, heard Jake's words and felt anger rise in his chest. How could Jake pretend to care when he was the one who caused all this suffering? But still, David said nothing. The second day, things get worse. The next morning brought even more bad news. 3 more people had fallen sick during the night from lack of water. The small children were the worst affected. Their bodies needed water more than adults, but there was barely enough to go around. Chief Mike had to make a difficult decision. "We must ration the water," he announced. "Each person can only have 1 small cup per day until we find a solution." 1 cup per day! It was not nearly enough, but it was all they had. The local shops began closing because they had no water to keep their goods fresh. The restaurant shut down completely. Even the bank where David worked had to close because the staff were too sick and tired to work properly. If this continues for another week, people will start dying, Doctor, Paul told Chief Mike privately. The fear in his voice was clear. This was not just about being uncomfortable anymore. People's lives were at risk. That afternoon, something else strange happened. Old Mama Janet, who was known for having dreams that sometimes came true, asked to speak to the community. "I had a vision last night," she said, her voice shaking. "I saw our river when it was young and full of life, and I saw a beautiful woman living in the water, protecting it and keeping it clean. People listened carefully. Mama Janet's visions were not always clear, but they were never completely wrong. In my vision," she continued, "I saw a greedy man kill this woman, and when she died, our river died with her." Gasps and murmurs spread through the crowd. "Are you saying someone in our community killed a mermaid?" asked Teacher Kate. "I don't know who it was," Mama Janet replied, "but I know that our river had a guardian, and that guardian is now gone." David's heart began beating so fast he thought everyone could hear it. Jake, standing across the crowd, had turned completely pale. "This is just superstition," Jake said loudly, trying to sound confident. Rivers don't have guardians. This is 2024, not 1824. But some of the older people in the community were nodding their heads. My grandmother used to tell stories about river spirits, said Mr. Samuel, who was in his 70s. She always said we should respect the water because it has a guardian who protects it. My mother told me the same stories, added Mrs. Comfort. She said that long ago, before our community was built here, the local people always made offerings to the river spirit before taking water. More and more people began sharing similar stories their grandparents had told them, stories they had forgotten or dismissed as old wives' tales. But now, with their river gone and their community dying, these stories didn't seem so impossible anymore. So what do we do? Asked Chief Mike. If there really was a guardian and if someone really killed her, how do we fix this? Mama Janet closed her eyes and thought for a long moment. In my vision, she said slowly, I saw that the only way to bring back the river is for someone to pay the price. Someone who truly understands what was lost must give up their life to restore the balance. The crowd fell silent. Give up their life? You mean someone has to die? Whispered Mrs. Grace. That's what I saw, Mama Janet replied sadly. That night, David could not sleep. He lay in his bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything that had happened. His neighbors were suffering. Children were crying from thirst. People were getting sick. And he knew exactly who was responsible. I should have stopped Jake, David whispered to himself. I should have fought harder to save her. The image of the guardian's sad eyes kept appearing in his mind. She had looked at him with such hope, believing he would help her, but he had failed. Around midnight, David made a decision that would shock everyone. He got dressed quietly and walked to the place where the river used to be. The moonlight shone on the dry, cracked earth that had once been underwater. David knelt down and placed his hands on the ground. I'm sorry, he said out loud, even though no one was there to hear him. I'm sorry I couldn't save you. I'm sorry I let that evil man hurt you. As he spoke, David felt something strange. The ground under his hands felt warm, as if something was still alive deep beneath the surface. If what Mama Janet said is true, David continued, if someone needs to give their life to bring back the river, then let it be me. I failed to protect you when you needed me. Now let me make up for that mistake. David had made his choice. Tomorrow, he would tell the community everything. He would confess that he knew who killed the guardian, and he would offer his life to restore their river. But what David didn't know was that someone else had been listening to his words. Hidden behind a tree nearby, Jake had heard everything, and Jake was not going to let David reveal his secret.